So I want you to have a higher conversion rate so you can actually serve more people and get your work into to those that need it the most. And so there's kind of like a hardcore marketing side, but there's also just an impact side. If you want to create a bigger impact, like it's to your advantage and to the people you're serving to like get them in your program so that you can make the transformation in their life. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Conscious Marketer Podcast. This is Richard here, joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey, everybody.
And we've got a solo episode here where we're just going to do a little sharing. And we're going to be talking about the biggest mistakes in marketing. And we're going to be talking about some of our own mistakes. And this will be a little bit vulnerable and share some of the things that we've done wrong through the years. It's never 100% wrong, but sometimes we don't get it all right. That's how they say that the pioneers have arrows in their backs or whatever. So we have a few arrows that we've pulled out, and it's because of that we're still around, because you keep learning through all these little micro failures and you just keep going. Kylie, do you want to maybe start and share maybe one thing that one of the big mistakes you've made and you learn, and now it's kind of etched into your soul, and you're like, okay, I'm never going to make that mistake with myself or any of my clients again?
Yeah, totally. My favorite one is the first big one that I made. It was right when I was going off on my own. It was 2012 or 2013, after I'd worked for a bunch of other companies and learned behind the scenes, which is how I learned. I have this great friend, Mike Hill. He has the biggest internet marketing Facebook group and the oldest, and it's called Internet Marketing Super Friends. And he called me up one day, and we had kind of been peripheral to each other because I wrote great performing ads, and he's an ads guy, and he saw some of my stuff and he wanted to connect with me. So one day he called me and he just said, Kylie, God told me I'm supposed to help you. Now, this guy never promotes anybody really in his group. He keeps it mostly a promotion-free zone, but when he does promote, he really believes in you. So he told me he was going to promote an upcoming webinar series to his audience. I had an email list of 500 at that time. He made one post in his Internet Marketing Super Friends group, and I doubled my list from one Facebook post. So he gave me 500 opt-ins. So I felt really pressured to perform, and it was my first webinar. I had been managing affiliate programs and running Facebook ad campaigns, and so I knew what needed to go in a webinar, but it was my first time, and that's very scary. So I did the webinar. He was there, and I didn't make any sales, like none. And he called me up after the webinar, and he said, Kylie, you're selling storytelling in launches, and you didn't tell one single story in your webinar, like not one. And so that was a really big mistake. And I never start a webinar today without telling at least 10 to 15 minutes of story. When we do webinars with multiple people, we try to break it up into, 5 minutes each of storytelling. But it's very imperative that no matter what you're doing, you start it with a story. I invest in storytelling all the time. I'm taking a new class right now with a guy who does the storytelling for NASA and Facebook and Google, and he's such a genius. And he said yesterday in the class, he said, never assume that people are going to get it. Like, never assume that your message speaks for itself. You always need a story. And so that was my biggest fail ever in my entire career. It was very embarrassing. I felt terrible. We added a couple more follow-up webinars for that campaign, and I ended up enrolling 40 people into my course because I added some stories. I ended up doing like 3 or 4 more webinars and getting more people on it and involved. And, it was a big learning lesson. I was mortified, and hopefully you'll never, ever, ever do anything without a story.
I love that. Never do anything without a story. So carry your story with you. I love that's such a great example of something that like changes you forever. You make that mistake once and you're like, okay, that's never going to happen again. I would say, because we've run an agency for a long time and over 15 years, that's a long time. I would say we could probably run this particular podcast for like a few days because, you make mistakes along the way. Before I share my mistake, I think one of the qualities that I really feel is important if you're listening to this podcast it's not so much to avoid all mistakes. It's just to recognize if you've made a mistake and then how fast you can pivot after. And some of the mistakes you made will be, oh, I don't ever want to do that again. And that launch or whatever I did was a complete failure. But often, you can pivot in almost every launch or every program we're releasing. In the middle, we're making adjustments. We're like, oh, this isn't working. Let's go this way. That's not working. Let's try this. Or I've even changed the name mid-launch, which is hard to do, so I always say never give up on a launch until literally the last closing days. And the reason I say that is because sometimes 50-60% of the sales will come in the last 2 days. And so if you feel like it's not going so well. So I just wanted to pre-frame this mistake thing by saying you can recover, and it's also a matter of how fast you pivot when you make a mistake. I think it's really important. The mistake that I learned early on in the career was just, I got really good at figuring out the potential for a launch and whether something was going to make money or not. And there are certain types of offers that require a lot of work. And if the list size isn't big enough, then it doesn't matter how well you do. It can really be a drain on a company. And I won't share the particular thing we launched, but we were launching a membership site, and we had put a lot of effort in, and the membership site required, a lot of the creator's time every month for, over a year. And so when you commit to that type of offer where the person has to be online for extended period of time, then you want to make sure you sell enough units, So if it's, let's just say it's a $50 membership a month. And if you sell 20, well, that's $1,000 a month, But if you have to spend 15 or 20 hours to produce that every month of your team time or the creator's time, including the creator's time, then it can be a real drain. So for this particular launch, we launched a membership site, and we had, maybe 25 people join. And when I looked at it, what I realized was that the concept was good, it was solid, and our conversion rate was really high, actually. Our conversion rate was, around 3% or whatever. The problem was the list size just wasn't big enough. So a 3% conversion rate on a list of 100 is just 3 people. And so a conversion rate of 3% on 1,000 people. So this person had around 1,000 people on their list. Was 25 people. And so 25 times, I think the offer was around $25. It's $625 a month. Well, this person's personal rate was $250 an hour or something like that. So you start to do the numbers and you're like, this is a massive fail. And in that situation, the offer was great and the conversion rate was great. It was just that what we needed to do for that client, which we ended up coming back around to and doing. And what they needed to do was find some methods to build their email list first. And so again, if that client had 10,000 people on the list and a 3% conversion rate, then that would be 300 people, right? Is that right? Do I have that right? Yeah, 300 people. So 300, all of a sudden it becomes 15,000 a month or whatever it is. At 50 or 25, it would be 7,500. So all of a sudden it becomes a viable business. It becomes a 6-figure business, on the same launch. And with that particular offer, the interesting thing is it doesn't, to serve 25 people or 250 people or 2,000 people, it wouldn't have taken any extra time. And so, so it just meant that we needed to have a larger list size. So the list size became a very important part of how we evaluate, whether we're going to take a launch or whether a launch is right. And in particular, membership sites, I know there are some people in the market, I won't name names, but they say, hey, you can launch a membership site if you only have 100 people or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's just a really bad idea with the output. Unless you're charging $1,000 a month or something like that, and it's not really a membership site. That's more of a group coaching package or something like that. So, so that's kind of informed how we look. And that actually was one of the reasons we developed something called Product Launch Calculator. And in the show notes for this podcast, if you go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast, I'll put a link to that. And it's just a little Google calculator that you can type in your list size and your offer price. And we have, there's one spreadsheet for just membership sites and one for offers. And you can type in your numbers and you can it spits out, if you have to choose your conversion rate, it'll actually spit out what you'll make in a launch. So that product launch calculator kind of came from that experience, or was one of the things that came from that experience. That, and also a client was always asking us, like, how much am I going to make from this launch? So that's, I think that's a useful share because there's like a teaching in there for everybody listening.
Absolutely. And if you're listening before mid-August, we're actually doing an email list building virtual summer camp. So you can hit us up for details about that. And if you're listening to this after mid-August, maybe we can get you the recordings of that if you're interested in building your email list so that you don't have to go through the pains of launching to crickets. So I love this second big mistake. And I think most people do it. That's why I want to share it with you today. And it is speaking from your point of view in your marketing instead of really getting inside the head of the person you're speaking to. So last year we were working on a really important campaign and the sales were so low. And I was the sole copywriter for the project. I felt very responsible for the sales. And I kept on writing what I was thinking about, and what was going on for me. And when the sales were so low, then I reached out to the person whose list we were actually writing to. And I just kind of asked her, what is going on with your audience right now? And she told me very specifically what it was. And I took that information and she wrote an email to me about the pain points and the problems that their list was experiencing. And I pretty much verbatim put that in an email. And that particular email tripled the sales in the launch. And then I used it again when we launched the Soul Syndicate. It was a lot of the same audience that we were speaking to. So I actually just took that email and used it again. And it got 66 sales to our Soul Syndicate, whereas all the other emails that we wrote got about 22 sales. So I feel like a lot of times we're the expert and we're the one who knows, and we try to speak about our expertise or what we know or what we're passionate about, and we try to get it out there and we focus on our message and we forget who's receiving the message and what their pain is and what they're going through and what they want. And that is a bad idea. And everybody does it. Every copywriter falls into that trap at points. And it's just something you always want to avoid. So one thing I tell people to do is create an avatar. We have tons of trainings on avatar. I won't get into it right now, but you create your avatar. And while you're creating your avatar, you actually print it out with a face and all of the stuff we go through, like what do they want? Who are they? What are their demographics? What are their psychographics? What are their soul graphics? And you actually make a personality. Like I had Jackie, the brand hero, and it was like, Jackie is this kind of person. She lives here. She likes this. She doesn't like that. And I would have it next to my computer. And every time I would go to write, I could look at it and get in touch with her. And it was really funny because I was doing a webinar one time and I shared Jackie, the brand hero, with the people on the webinar. And I had like 3 people message me after the webinar and say, it's so funny that you used me as your avatar. They thought I was literally using them as an example, but it wasn't true. But they identified so much with the avatar that I was hitting the nerve in the right place. So always remember who you're speaking to before you do any marketing, because you're going to spin your wheels if you speak from you instead of speaking to them. So that was a huge mistake and I still make it, but I'm getting better.
Yeah, like I think there can be a lot of mistakes with the avatar and just getting really clear on what that avatar is feeling and kind of resonating and making the other person feel like the avatar is them. If you can enable that to happen, it's like so huge. I wanted to share like a more practical mistake that I see a lot of people make. And I've kind of learned it through the years because I think there's a natural proclivity as a creator to create, and when you're doing your launches and your offer, a lot of times how this kind of plays out is a lot of options. And one of the places that you'll find that people like to create options around is pricing. And I would say it's kind of been one of my subtle things that I focused on when working with clients is just the pricing. And so I've priced a lot of things. And in fact, just yesterday I got an email and somebody was asking me to look at their offer, and they were excited because they had just released their new thing out. And I looked at it and my heart kind of dropped, because when I went to look at, what they were offering, they had like 6 choices. And then when you clicked one of the choices, you had to make another couple choices, And one of the things we've learned through the years after doing hundreds of launches and over $50 million of sales online, that's a lot of launches and sales, is that the best conversion rates on when you put out things out there in the market, clients want to be led. They want fewer options, actually. Like, we live in a world of distraction, and a world where people have decision fatigue. And when they've just listen to your video, if you give them like 3 payment options or, these kinds of things, then, I think this is one of the reasons why choose what you want to pay kind of scenarios often kind of backfire. It's because people just freeze on those offers. And so generally you just want 2 options. You want a single price with 2 options. And so you have a one pay and then some kind of payment plan. And it starts to get complicated if you want to do one through credit card and one through PayPal. And what about the third payment plan, or can I extend it? It's all of a sudden you have all these different things going on. And so sometimes we even like just, especially if it's below $300, we don't even like to give the payment plan. We'll just do one option, because, well, first of all, if it's a pay up front, then people are committed and you'll have lower refunds, which is great. But also it actually has higher conversions generally, initially. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll just put a single payment plan and then add a payment plan later, just to simplify it so people can make that decision and then go later. And then here's the thing, there's always exceptions, there's always exceptions to the rules. And so the one exception to this that I'll just share is that if you're doing higher priced programs and things like that, say it's like a $10,000 thing or a $20,000 thing, sometimes we'll put a line in, here's the payment plan. If you need other options, contact us and we'll work it out. And so, because a lot of those times it's a conversation. And then, the other thing we don't like to do is offer a scholarship right next to the payment buttons, because often the person that's going to click the scholarship button is the person who's wearing a Rolex and driving a Tesla, and so, and so you just want, it's not that I'm against scholarships. It's just that I want to get those scholarships into the right hands. And so we'll offer those often later in a launch, or we'll put it in an FAQ, and the people that are looking for that will reach out and we'll do it. But again, offering a scholarship amongst the pricing is actually a diversion, and it freezes people. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, I'm going to apply for the scholarship later. And then they just never come back to your page. And so you've just lost that opportunity. So, just kind of summarize, keep the options limited. As you start to add on, hey, do you want to add a VIP day on, or do you want to add these payment plans on, or as soon as you start to add options, especially at a critical point where a decision needs to be made, just realize you're probably going to decrease conversions. And if you decrease conversion, from the mental side, it's to decrease conversions, but from an impact side, you're not helping that person create the change and the transformation in their life. And so you're just not serving as many people. And so I want you to have a higher conversion rate so you can actually serve more people and get your work into people's, to those that need it the most. And so there's kind of like a hardcore marketing side, but there's also just an impact side. If you want to create a bigger impact, like it's to your advantage and to the people you're serving to like get them in your program so that you can make the transformation in their life.
Absolutely. And I've never made any other mistakes, so we can wrap it up now. Just kidding. I do think that's enough to get you going though. And, we would always love to hear from you. If you're listening to this on our website, then feel free to leave us a comment where you share what some of your mistakes are or what you're learning. You can also go to our Conscious Marketers Path Facebook group and start a conversation about it there. We can, we're always here to support you. So if you're not in that group, hit us up, join it, connect with us. And yeah, if there's any particular thing you'd like to hear on this podcast too, let us know. And we're always open to new ideas, but hopefully you got some value out of this conversation today and you can avoid some of the pitfalls that we've fallen into in our collective 25 plus years as marketers.
Yeah, it's always interesting because the podcast, this is such a good podcast because this is Kylie's idea. And I was like, give me a minute. Let me write down all my mistakes. And I wrote a list of about 7 things. So we may have to do a part 2, but there's great wisdom in knowing that you can recover from mistakes. And there's also great wisdom in listening to things like this and working with mentors where they can, I sometimes say guide you away from those deep, dark alleys where there's dangerous creatures down there. And you don't need to go down that alley. You can just keep walking and go to the gelato store, the coffee store, or whatever your final destination is. So thanks so much for listening to the Conscious Marketer podcast. We love having you in our community. Go make sure you're on our list at consciousmarketer.com. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review there. And we also have a Facebook group. I'll mention that, Conscious Marketers Path. I'm not sure how many people we have in there. I think 5,000 or 6,000. We do post great content inside there. So go join that group. It's one of our more active groups. We'd love to have you in there. Thanks for being here on the podcast, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.